Yes, another feeding vid.
What it look like, what it be like, what it do, YouTube? This is V coming at you this Thursday evening to feed four. That's right, I said four of my snakes. The first one will be the Sun Glow. The second one will be my Possible Super Hypo Het Lipstick. The third one would be my Rainbow Boa, and the fourth being my black, or my Mexican Black King Snake. So let's get started. It seemed like Glow, my Sun Glow, is wasting no time devouring her meal. As we all know, boas can be hardy eaters. I feed them once a week. And as you can see for my Sun Glow, I have ribbed cardboard as a substrate, and I cut out where her hide is. And I have paper towel there so she can get the heat from the heating pad. But what I find interesting though, prior to me placing the ribbed cardboard in there, I thought it would be a lot easier on her as far as shed is concerned, which I never had a problem with her shedding, but I figured it would be a lot easier for her to shed if I had that type of substrate in there. But prior to putting it in, I had paper towel. She was very active with the paper towel, so I'm just going to monitor it and see whether or not I'll switch it back to a substrate back to paper towel, because like I said, she tends to stay hidden in her hide, and whereas before, prior to me putting that substrate in, she would come out of her hide and roam her enclosure, whereas now there's no happenings. She's like my my Het Lipstick here, who stays hidden. She rarely ever comes out of her hide. When she comes out of her hide, she's soaking. That's the only time she'll come out, if she wants to soak. Like she devoured it in less than what? Nope, a little more than 4 minutes. You can see what my Het Lipstick is doing. Geez, just in that short amount of time, she too devoured her mouse.
Hey, lady, won't you just take a picture? It lasts a lot longer. How you do?
To feed my rainbow boa, Rain, trying to do this while she trying to get the mouse. And of course, she won't let go of my hand. I know there's different opinions on taking snakes out of their enclosure and feeding them, but I'm of the mindset I'd rather, since I'm on a smaller scale, I don't have multiple snakes that I have to contend with. I mean, I do have multiple snakes, but I don't have a whole lot that it becomes daunting to remove them from their enclosure. But I'm of the mindset that I'd rather feed them outside the enclosure. I know because it really commits me to interacting with them. And my Mexican black king snake, because I hadn't messed with her in a couple of days, she became spooked, and I will chuck that up to just the way in which I opened her enclosure. It was a lot of movement going on, of which she wasn't accustomed. And normally when I go in her enclosure, I just take my time. I let her get acclimated to the temperature change, because I'm opening up her enclosure, and then I'm removing, because she likes to hide up under the paper towel. So I'm constantly, removing the paper towel. This time I just yanked the paper towel away from her, and she was spooked, and so she started thrashing her tail at me. And then when I went to pick her up, she skunked me, which was the first time she had done that, skunked me. And then as I was putting the mouse in the enclosure, she was striking at it as if to ward it off. But once I left the mouse in her enclosure, she had calmed down, and she had eaten it. And I was better able to handle her. So, it's my theory. I'd rather take my snakes out of their enclosure and feed them than to feed them in the enclosure. And it has nothing to do with basically cage aggression or anything like that. I've had boas and ball pythons, I want to say roughly 19 years ago. I had 13 snakes at that time. But that's neither here nor there. And I was also asked about feeding, because I used to breed my rats. And back then, I did feed live. I'm not opposed to feeding live. I know that's another bone of contention with a lot of people on when owning snakes, is whether to feed them live or frozen thaw. I just don't have, I do have the room to actually breed my rats, but when I was breeding rats, I did not like the smell. And no matter how often you clean their substrate, especially if you have a lot of them, it's that urine is just, it's strong. And I had a room dedicated to them, but I didn't like that smell in my basement. So for me, even though it's a lot cheaper to breed your rats, and but I just don't like the smell, so I opt to just do the frozen thaw this time around. And again, excuse my the noise in the background. My SLR, I have it set to autofocus, so as it focuses on the subject, it just makes that noise, or captures that noise. The metabolism of the black king snakes, they're very high. I can feed her twice a week. She's always in shed. It's like almost every, I want to say, 3 weeks. I'll have to look at my log, but it just seems like about every 3 weeks or so she sheds. And I must be doing something right, because all 4 of my snakes, they shed a full shed. Now, I have some other videos that I have yet to post, but I had prior to my Sun Glow and my Possible Super Hit Lipstick arriving. I had an albino and boa. Excuse me, I had an albino boa, and she had, I had her for 17 days before she actually succumbed to, I don't know what it was. I thought it was with the body inclusion disease, or the inclusion body disease, but I didn't have her body tested by a vet to see what she passed from. I don't know if it was the mouse that I actually bought from a reptile dealer, breeder, I'm sorry, a reptile breeder, or she came with some type of virus. At first I thought it was something that I did, but the same setup I had for her, I have for my other 2 boas, and they're thriving. But of course, the breeder basically was suggesting or eluding that it was the way in which I had my enclosure set up for her. But again, she showed signs of that inclusion body disease. She was stargazing and contorting her, neck upside down, and she bit herself. It was almost like she had a seizure, and but I just chucked it up to a loss. So I chugged along, and like I said, at the time I just had the 3. I had the boa, the rainbow boa, the albino boa, and the Mexican black king snake. And the rainbow boas, for the most part, are a lot harder to, well, not really, even for a novice, but it depends on the individual. I really can't say. I'm not an expert by no stretch of the imagination. And any snake, as long as a person does their research, because I was a novice and didn't know anything about rainbow boas other than what I read, and monitoring the humidity. It's real easy to monitor the humidity. If nothing else, what I did, and I still do, I have the sphagnum moss that I spray down in her enclosure, and that tends to keep the humidity where it needs to be. And just drill some holes that you can tend to, you can cover or uncover, and just monitor the humidity. But I say all that to say that it's much more, I guess for lack of a better word, complicated to take care of a rainbow boa as opposed to a regular boa. But either way, I was doing fine, taking care of all at least the 3, until the albino wound up coming down with something and passing away. So I don't think it had anything to do with the way in which I had set up her enclosure. I guess that's what I was really getting at. But the long version. Well, guys, I guess since Black Diamond is on her last stretch of this mouse, I will end my video here. And until next time, deuces.